Welcome, everybody. Steve Weil here with my partner, Ty Berding, and together we've been representing associations and CD claims, including those as part of Berding Weil since 1988. We're glad you're able to join us today to talk about these storms that have been inundating the Bay Area. Our phones have been ringing off the hook. Managers and directors, I'm sure you're getting the same. So just in a few minutes, we want to kind of give you some ideas and some things to think about in light of these storms. So does the association have any special duty to deal with the consequences of these storms? And the answer is probably yes. Associations have a duty to use reasonable care to protect residents and buildings from foreseeable risks of harm, including property damage. So that doesn't mean the association is the guarantor that nothing bad will happen as a result of all these rains and floods. But it's always true in the association world that doing something is infinitely better than doing nothing. So here's some thoughts. For our detached single-family home developments with V-ditches and hillsides, you want to get a contractor or maybe even staff to run up these hills and look for debris in the V-ditches and clear them out. Sometimes these V-ditches run across private property, and if so, you want to send an e-blast out to the community. Hey, if you've got a V-ditch, take a minute, go outside, and make sure the flows are running well. For our condominium association and plan development clients where we've got building responsibilities, we want to make sure the gutters are running clean and clear. You don't want water backing up underneath flashing around chimneys. To the extent we're responsible for balconies, we want to make sure, in the event there's a negative slope backwards, right, to try to get that water off of the balconies and maybe even let the residents know, hey, take a broom, you can help out a little bit. You want to have a contractor or an engineer on speed dial. In the event there are significant problems happening, you want to get people out there to minimize the problems. Ultimately, the association may not be responsible, but to the extent it can mitigate the damage, and that's a special legal word to address problems as best you can, then that's a good thing to do. We want to check the CC&Rs. Sometimes they have surprising language in there. Sometimes it's very helpful. For example, the association's only liable for problems if it's grossly negligent. And at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes there's wording in there that's not helpful. For example, the association shall maintain the common areas in first-class condition, which might impose a higher risk. You want to give a call over to your insurance broker. The insurance brokers for the community, ask if they have any tips. Sometimes surprisingly, they do. Obviously, you want to have a communications plan. You want to be documenting things. You want to let people know what you're doing, residents as well as owners, and you want them to be reporting, to the association leaks, especially around windows through the roof, or again at the deck ledgers. There may be legal recourse against third parties, and Tyler, your expertise is really in landslides, earth movement, soils problems, condominium leaks, construction defects. So let me speak to this issue about potential recourse and what should the manager and the members be doing, given all these rains.
Well, after protecting the property, as Steve suggests, as best you can while this storm is happening, later, after you're sorting out whatever damage may have occurred, keep in mind that it's not just the homeowners association or the individual owners that may bear responsibility for the cost of repairing it. As Steve said, there's maybe third parties involved. For instance, if there's a big creek, a regional creek that flows through your property, maybe it flows down from a lake or reservoir above, maybe it flows down from a holding basin and some other associations or some other property owners' property, and it flows through your property, and it because of the volume of water that's coming through there, it erodes the creek banks and causes damage to homes which are on the side of the creek, or it overflows and flows into those homes. That water is not just the water that belongs to the homeowners association that you belong to. That water comes from a lot of different places, and owners upstream may very well be responsible as well. Same thing's true for landslides. If landslides are often not just on one property, they flow from above and flow down to and damage property below. Owners have to look at, or anyone damaged should look to those adjacent properties to see if they can share the responsibility for the damage that was caused by the landslide.
Ty, what about, well, yeah, actually, I was going to say, so what I've seen is when there's a lot of new development, upstream, now the water doesn't drain right down. And so the surcharge on the downstream creeks is really bad. And we've seen that, I think, these last couple of weeks over in Danville and San Ramon, especially.
That's a much bigger legal question, because as you say, as properties develop, they pave over the watershed so the water can absorb, and it gets channeled into creeks and ditches and flows downhill with a lot greater velocity and damages properties below it. We had a property in Antioch, project in Antioch, that had a lake, and when it was built, all of the hills were pristine. But later they were paved over and developed, and that discharged tremendous amounts of silt into that lake and just about filled it up. So there's a real question as to whether a public entity might be responsible for having allowed that to happen, or are not maintaining those regional channels the way they should. A drainage district might have responsibility for the channels that are flowing through your property, through the association's property. All of those third parties should be looked at if you are damaged by a storm and water flowing out of a watercourse.
You and I had another one of those years ago in a development in Concord off of Treat Boulevard. Very, very similar issue. Don't forget, of course, if we do have the possibility of government responsibility, there are very, very limited statutes of limitations. They're actually called claim statutes, which require extraordinarily prompt action to bring a claim, to put the cities or the county on notice. It's not a lawsuit, it's a special kind of claim, and you need legal help for that. And the timing is very tight and very strict. Tyler, what about in the condo cases, where we've got leaks? We've got a call this morning for a development in San Francisco, and they can't get anybody to come out, right? All of the contractors who do this, they're just completely inundated, like completely inundated. And so what they want to do is at least try to spruce up the hallways and that. But for the CD cases, one thing you said to me earlier, they need to rely on the lawyers that they're working with, right? They need to call them their case analysts. What other things?
The very first thing to know, if you're in a construction defect case and you're sustaining damage due to these storms, whether or not it's related to the claim or not, the lawyers have to know what that is, and they have to have that information as quickly as possible. But in all cases, you do what those lawyers tell you to do or not do, that they're responsible for the case, and they're going to give you the best advice. Generally speaking, in our cases, if there's damage, and the association does have an obligation to mitigate that damage to the best of its ability. Now, if it's serious damage, a tree fell on the building or something like that, not much you can do except evacuate the owners and then deal with it later. But in terms of leaks, like you just mentioned, Steve, if the association has the ability to confine those leaks to certain areas or somehow fix them or mitigate them, they should do it, but they should let the legal team know what they're doing. They're probably going to be asked to take photographs of the damage. They're probably going to be, the legal team may send someone out to photograph the damage, and it may also be necessary in some cases to notify the defendants of your attempts to do these repairs, so they can observe if they want to. Now, understanding that under the conditions we're going through this week, that you may not have time to do all that, and you have to take care of your property, you have to protect your owners, and you have to mitigate it as best you can. But if you are in a CD case, a construction defect case, you should definitely let your lawyers know what's happening and be available to let them take pictures, or ask you to take pictures, and to mitigate it as best you can.
Good. Yeah, good. It's probably going to start to rain any minute again. So we're going to let everybody go. You probably got other stuff to do. So thanks for joining Tyler and I. Give us a call if we can help you out. Thank you.